because I think that there is no pain like family pain. No pain like family pain. I mean, it's one thing if a stranger from Walmart kind of sins against you, you just think they're dumb or they don't know how awesome you are, or maybe they're a Michigan fan. I don't know. But you just think that's an anomaly. They're crazy. But when someone who's supposed to have your back, when someone who shares your DNA, or someone who literally shares your last name, when someone like that hurts you, man, there is no pain like family pain. And the truth is, even if there's no intention involved, meaning they didn't mean to hurt you, they didn't set out to scorn you, it doesn't make it hurt less. Like if I back over your foot with my truck and it's an accident, it doesn't take the pain away, does it? It doesn't. And I don't say that in jest. I mean that literally, that some of you have been hurt intentionally and many of you have been hurt unintentionally. But the reality is, today, if you came hoping for a happy, happy, joy sermon, get ready for a gut punch. Get ready for a gut punch. We're in Genesis, and we're picking up where we left off last week and what was happening. Remember, we're talking about Joseph. When we talked about his brothers and the way they beat him, and they threw him in that pit, and they sold him into slavery. Well, so many years have passed. They thought Joseph was dead. And this famine that we started talking about last week had started to hit, and it spread to Dothan, this area where his brothers lived. And so now they have come to this region. They've come to Egypt in search of food, and they do not recognize their brother. And right now, what was happening was they are bowing and they are begging for food. And in that moment, I think Joseph is thinking, I knew it. I knew it. I knew God is who he says he is, and he always keeps his promise. You see, this situation is exactly the vision that God gave him back in chapter 37. Now, I encourage you to read chapters 43 and 44 on your own, because Joseph, they don't recognize him. And for those chapters, he's kind of jacking with them like any good brother would. And he does he sets one of them up like they stole something. But it's all in a purpose and plan to get his dad there. And they still don't recognize him. Because the last time they saw him, he was 17, and now he's about 39. And anyone who's ever been to a 20-year high school reunion knows you need name tags, right? Because you look at that picture, you look, oh. I mean, not you, of course. You look great, so God bless you. But it's true, and so they don't recognize him, and he's also, by the way, think about this, he's the prime minister of Egypt now, and so he's got the weird haircut, he's got the eye makeup, he's got the tattoos, he's got the earrings. Actually, he looks more like a cross connector than a Hebrew boy. So they don't recognize him at all, and then if we go here, when we get to chapter 43, again, they show up looking for food, and he's in charge. And so all of this is throwing them off guard. And suddenly, here's where we pick up in chapter 45. So here's Joseph. He's the prime minister. He's second only to the Pharaoh. And his brothers are bowing down before him. And remember, again, if you read through those, this is their second journey into Egypt, and he has them meet them in the palace, in his home. And we have to believe that because of all the things that happened, they think they're being summoned to the palace because they're in trouble. They're like, we're in so much trouble because Joseph had been messing with them. And so we're going to pick it up in 45 in verse 1. Joseph could no longer keep his composure in front of all his attendants. So he called out, send everyone away from me. Send everyone away. No one was with him when he revealed his identity to his brothers, but he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it. I want you to think about that emotion that would be happening as we're reading through this. He wept so loudly, he couldn't contain himself. He sends everyone else away. And it's also the Pharaoh's household heard this. Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? Now, again, I think in that moment, the brothers would have been like, oh, no. Like, I'm just serious. That's what they would have been thinking because the last time, they're thinking, the last time we saw you, we threw you in a pit and sold you into slavery. And now you're the king of the world under the Pharaoh. But it says they could not answer him because they were terrified in his presence. Now, it's not just because of his stature, it would be because of his tone. It would be because of this uncontrollable emotion that is bursting forth and all these things that have been happening. They were terrified. That lets you know that this wasn't a Hallmark moment reunion. Then Joseph said to his brothers, please come here. And they came near. They came near. Now, if you grew up in church, this is where I want to assist you. I want to help you. I want to help you take all of those Sunday school scripts and storyboard messages and Old Testament passages and throw them out the window. Because this was not a happy, happy, joy, joy situation. You have to think, you have to remember, this is a real man with real emotions just like any of us. And the last time they saw him, the last time he saw them, saw these brothers that did all of this stuff to him when they were supposed to have his back. The reason this man is crying is he can immediately remember everything. He remembers what it smells like to be in the bottom of that cistern. He remembers all of the pain, all of the doubt, all of the resentment. Dare I say hatred welling up in him, the bitterness. He had all of that, and all of it is welling back up. And that's why he says he couldn't even contain himself. Because here are the people, his family that are supposed to have his back, supposed to take care of him, because that's what older siblings are supposed to do. They're supposed to take care of the younger siblings, period. And when people that are supposed to protect you, hurt you, whether it's blood relatives or maybe a spouse, it just hurts worse. And Joseph remembers what it felt like to look into his brothers, who he loved, as they beat him, as they tore his clothes off, as they punched him and ripped it all off and they throw him in a pit. He can remember exactly what it felt like when he's shackled behind a camel being drugged to Egypt thinking his life is over. And he can remember what jail felt like when he was falsely accused of rape. And he knew in that moment that all of this was because of his brothers. So let me ask, have you been hurt by family? I think most of us can say yes. I'm pretty sure none of us to this degree. But maybe in 2.5 months or so, you're going to be sharing turkey with people that stabbed you in the back. Maybe over the holidays, you know what? Maybe you won't even see them because those relationships have not been repaired at all. They've not been healed. And so I'm just telling you, the man we're reading about here has been through it. He's been through it, and we can learn a lot. And in this moment, he is dealing with some serious pain from family members who were supposed to take care of him. And so this is not some sort of children's story. Get that out of your mind. This is as real as your next breath. And so he says, come here, come near me, please. And they're bowing down. They're terrified. And so let me ask you, in this moment, if you were Joseph, what would you do? What would you do? I mean, really. Don't give me the church answer. Oh, one option, absolutely. He could just let him starve to death, couldn't he? He could say, you know what? You're not family to me anymore. That died. That ended when I was 17 years old lying in that pit. So I have no obligation to take care of you or keep you alive. So head on back to Dothan. That's an option, isn't it? Or there's another option. He could just kill them. He's the second most powerful person on the planet. Snap of the fingers, they're gone. Say hello to my little friend. He just take them out. He has all the power, all the authority. Or at least could say, in your face. You called me a dreamer. You mocked me. You hated me. In your face. You beat me up, sold me. What's up now, peasant? Who's in charge now, peasant? Would you at least be like I told you so? Would any of that well up? After all of that? Not Joseph. Here's what he says. He says, I am Joseph, your brother. He said, the one you sold into Egypt, like, just in case you forgot which brother I am. And now, and again, imagine if you're one of the brothers and you're thinking, oh man, this is going to hurt. He says, and now, don't be grieved or angry with yourselves for selling me here. No, he doesn't just say, no big deal. He points out, technically, I'm here because of you. But I want you to, for the moment, I want to pause and I want you to grab onto something that if you ever have hopes or a desire, a godly desire to forgive, if you're ever in hopes of forgiving a family member, the very first thing you have to do to forgive someone is you have to actually face the sin that was committed against you. You have to face the sin that was committed against you. Some of us, in an effort to be like hyper-spiritual, we try to act what people did was no big deal. No worries. But you have to understand that this is a big deal. I'm telling you, some of the things that happened to some of you are a big deal. But throughout the text, Joseph never glosses over the fact that they betrayed him. Right? He never glosses over. He never says, it all worked out. No biggie. No, not at all. And some of the reasons that some of you haven't truly been able to forgive is because you try to forget and you try to pretend that some of these things didn't happen, or you just don't want to focus on it. And you think you're doing a great job, by the way, of ignoring it. The problem is you're the only one that thinks so. You're the only one that thinks it's not affecting you. You know what you look like? What you look like is, have you ever been around a guy who, say, like has an injury, right? And he tries to act like it's no big deal or he's not hurt? Like maybe a guy who's, about to turn 50, who used to be an athlete but is in no way anymore. You know the type. Maybe his knee hurts, his back hurts, and he's walking around a little hurt, and you're like, what's wrong? And he's like, nothing. If you know a guy like that. Because I think in his mind, he's still thinking he's cruising, but he's not. He's gimping along, and he's the only one who doesn't realize how obvious it is. You see, friends, some of us are gimping along relationally, and you think you look great, but everyone around you goes, no, the pain is evident. It's evident. And you can try to ignore it all you want, but you have to dig in, you have to deal with it. It never goes away if we just keep limping along. It'll always be there until you give it to the great physician to deal with it. You see, part of forgiving is that we have to figure out who's hurt us. And then we have to figure out what was actually taken from us, if something actually was. And we're going to talk about that today. But because until we deal with it, we can never cancel the debt. Not really. Not really. And so Joseph doesn't gloss over any of that. He's absolutely hitting them with grace, but he's not glossing over the fact of the matter. He says in verse 5, don't be grieved or angry with yourselves for selling me here. Or put it like this, that hurt. That hurt. This was real. The trajectory of my life changed completely because of what you did. But he also says, don't be grieved, because God sent me ahead of you to preserve life For the famine has been in the land for 2 years, and there will be 5 more years without plowing or harvesting. God sent me ahead of you to establish you as a remnant within the land and to keep you alive by a great deliverance. Friends, don't miss this. What's happening is Joseph understands. Joseph understands. Until we come to a place where we understand that God does actually allow pain in our lives, until we begin to understand that he will allow that so the trajectory of our lives can change and he can put us where he needs us. Joseph understood that what they did to him was evil. There was nothing that could be grandized out of it. This was straight up evil, but that God used their evil acts to position Joseph to save them. What if God has allowed you to go through some pain so that maybe, just maybe, your forgiveness of some person who hurt you, intentional or unintentional, could be the loudest sermon that they've ever heard? What if God allowed this so that your forgiveness could provide a pathway, a replication, if you will, to make forgiveness kind of the standard, the model, the example, the lesson taught, so that it could be extended to more people like a ripple effect? Because in God's economy, brothers and sisters, he'd say it's worth it. I know it doesn't make sense in the moment, but that's the gospel. And if you think, how can I say that? Easy, the cross. That God allowed his own son to bear the weight of all of our sin, to suffer and die for what? Your forgiveness. Are you following the pattern? This is so important. Therefore, it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to the Pharaoh, Lord of his entire household and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Return quickly to my father and say to him that it was your son Joseph that says, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to be with me without delay. So I think that not only does Joseph understand, but there's 3 things that Joseph understood that allowed him this ability to forgive his brothers, even in this most heinous of situations. And the first was, Joseph understands the sovereignty of God. Joseph understands the sovereignty of God. Joseph understood that God is ultimately in control of everything. Even though Joseph probably felt like his life was completely out of control. And here's the problem. Here's why I say that. If you or I do not believe that God's in charge of everything, then there is no way for us to understand that God could actually use this pain for his purpose. We won't fathom it. We won't connect the dots, and we will be stuck in victimhood for years and years, maybe decades and decades. And again, I just have to point to the cross, because the cross was the darkest day in human history, and that darkest day in human history became the pinnacle of our salvation. Friends, the second thing I think Joseph understood is Joseph is able to see God's hand in all because he forgave his brothers. Like the veil of darkness in that unforgiveness that clouded his vision and his judgment, because that was gone, because he forgave his brothers, he can see all that God has done. Joseph could not experience the victory he is walking in if he had spent his life choosing to be a victim. That's the difference, folks. And yet bad things happen to him. Awful things. I would wager worse than anything you've experienced, worse than anything that's happened to you. But you can spend the rest of your life either as a victim, or you can walk in the victory purchased to you by the blood of Jesus. There are some being held back today from God's full potential in your life because you're holding on to bitterness and resentment. You're holding on to these things and walking around, whether you want to admit it or not, in victimhood. You're walking around thinking, well, my life could have been so different. I could have had this, or maybe I could have had this person. But God is saying that is not what I called you to walk in. Stop blaming your family. Blame me. Blame me. And the third thing that I think Joseph understood is it said Joseph understands that he's part of a bigger story. God had sent him there to do the unthinkable, to save the people that hurt him. He's part of a bigger story. He didn't just save his brothers. He's not just going to save his dad. He's saving the land. Joseph's pain was a part of a bigger story. You see, Joseph understood that God does not revolve his plans around my life. God used him for a much greater purpose. And when you and I can finally get past ourselves, humble ourselves, and step into this ideology, we grab onto this understanding that God might actually use your life for the sake of his glory, for the sake of other people. And that's when we can walk in the freedom and forgive people. Not without that understanding, though. Not without that understanding. And so he says, don't be afraid, boys. God sent me here. And he forgives them. And he says, go get dad. And they do. And then because he forgives his brothers and he because of that forgiveness, he gets to have a relationship with his dad again. And for the next 17 years, he cares for his brothers and his dad. And the whole family comes to Egypt and he puts them up in Goshen, this amazing place to live. This amazing place. And if we go fast forward to chapter 50, when we get to chapter 50, he got married. He's got some kids now. Life is good. And then his dad, Jacob, his dad, Israel, gets sick and dies. And so we pick it up in chapter 50, verse 14. It says, after Joseph buried his father, he returned to Egypt with his brothers and all who had gone with him to bury his father. And when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said to one another, if Joseph is holding on to a grudge against us, he will certainly repay us for all the suffering we caused him. You see, that's what bitterness and unforgiveness and all of these things lead to. So many people fake it till they make it, and they say, oh, no, yeah, we're good. And the other person is left wondering, I don't think he's good. And they're horrified, they're terrified that everything is going to change and that maybe dad was the only thing keeping them alive. You see, that's exactly what unforgiveness is. It's you owe me. And at some point, that debt will be paid. At some point, I am going to get you back. I'm going to pay you back. But friends, that's exactly opposite of what Jesus teaches. And we either say we're Christians, or at least we say we're curious and we want to go in that direction. Jesus teaches in the book of Matthew, and we'll talk about that today. He doesn't talk about feelings when it comes to forgiveness. Because feelings are going to lie to you. Feelings are going to hold on to stuff that you shouldn't be holding on to. He talks about a debt-debtor relationship, that someone owes someone something. But you see, forgiveness, according to Jesus Christ, is to say, you don't owe me anymore. You don't owe me that anymore. And so we see the language his brothers are using, this debt-debtor relationship, like maybe Joe is going to pay us back. And so they sent this message to Joseph. Before he died, your father gave a command. Say this to Joseph, please forgive your brothers. 17 years has passed, and they're still holding on. They're still terrified. He says, please forgive your brothers' transgression and their sin, the suffering they caused you. Therefore, please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father. Joseph, he wept. He's reading this. He wept when their message came to him. His brothers also came to him, bowing down again, bowed down before him and said, we are your slaves. Now, a couple things here. These brothers say, we did evil against you. And Joseph never says, no biggie. He never says, oh, it never happened. Pretend it didn't happen. And some of you are probably thinking in your minds, yeah, okay, but you don't know my story. Of course, you're going to talk about forgiveness. You're a pastor. And I know sometimes you think, like, if you could just have the mic and you could stand up and tell everyone, this is exactly what happened to me. This is the chronological order, and this is why I've been wronged. And you think somehow that the rest of us are going to be like, oh, man, wow, yeah, that's right. Your situation is different. You shouldn't have to forgive anyone. I'm not suggesting that your situation isn't difficult. I'm not suggesting that it's somehow easy to just walk on through this. It is not easy to forgive. It's not. But Joseph's, again, standing in front of his brothers, and here comes that thing that all of us have to do when it comes to forgiveness, over and over and over and over. What you're going to have to do is remind yourself, I forgive you. You're going to have to remind yourself, I forgive you. Because your feelings are going to want to keep coming up and reminding you, I still feel that. Your feelings are going to lie to you. They're going to betray you. They're going to take you down the wrong path because your feelings cannot tell the difference. Your feelings cannot tell whether you've forgiven someone or not because it's a choice, not a feeling. I mean, have you ever been to a place or you dealt with a situation and it was rough and you said, okay, I've forgiven them, and then like either a smell in the air or a song comes on the radio and all of it starts swirling in your head because it reminds you of everything over and over and over. Am I the only one? And you start to chew on it in the quietness of your own thoughts. Brothers and sisters, what that is the enemy whispering, jabber-jawing in your ear, trying to convince you that forgiveness doesn't work. The pain is too real. Because if he can get us to doubt forgiveness on a horizontal level, do you understand the implication? If you and I cannot finally grasp onto forgiveness at the horizontal level, meaning all of us together, brothers and sisters in Christ, the body of Christ, with your family, all these people, if you cannot get it, then you will never understand the forgiveness of a Heavenly Father. If we can't get it on the horizontal, we'll never get it on the vertical. It's the master plan. It's the master plan. That's why it was such a big deal, and Jesus preached on this. And so he's saying, not only am I going to cancel this debt, but I'm also going to take care of you. Joseph is trying to plead with his brother, like, this is real. You don't have to fear me. I'm canceling this debt. Yes, I remember everything about all of those events. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it sucks. Yes, I wish I could take it away. But I'm canceling that debt. I'm going to take care of you. I'm reconciling this relationship. Just like, by the way, God adopts all of us into his family. That's what Joseph is doing here. He's readopting all of his brothers into his family, into his lavish lifestyle. And the reason why you and I can even gather here today, the reason why we have the opportunity to gather here today, can be traced all the way back to this decision to forgive right here. Friends, that is legacy. That's the ripple effect. The things we do matter. The people watching, the lessons being taught to your kids, the lessons being taught to coworkers around you. People say, I could never forgive something like that. Oh, really? There are very few things that you could tell me that would make me think that you're somehow above this forgiveness thing. This matters. This ripples throughout eternity. I'm telling you that the decisions you and I make will echo throughout eternity and are quite dependent on which side of it we'll be on. It matters. It matters a bunch. Watch this. Watch this. He says, and he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. In other words, it wasn't just the words. He speaks kindly, but he's comforting, reminding them, assuring them. Here's a test. Do you want to know if you've actually forgiven someone? You're like, oh yeah, I totally forgave them. Here's a test. Watch the way you talk about them. Watch the way you talk about them. Jesus taught this. Jesus says about your mouth, he says, you don't have a mouth problem. You got a heart problem. If you say you forgive somebody but says, I don't want him in my house, I don't want to see him, that's not forgiveness. If we look at Luke, look at chapter 6, verse 45. Jesus says, for the mouth speaks out of the overflow of the heart. So if you're flapping your gums about how great you are that you forgave, yet you're bad-mouthing and besmirching, that is not forgiveness. That is not forgiveness. And the reason why, again, we can even do any of this is because someone forgave before us. Friends, nothing accidentally slips out of your mouth. Oopsie. The terrible things we say in the heat of those moments reveal what's going on in our hearts. Now, I am not saying just because you say something dumb, you say something hurtful, that means you're the worst person on the planet. But it does mean that you're going through some heart problems in that moment. Those words coming out, I know myself. I'm by myself working on something doesn't break, and I let a word out of my mouth. I realize in that moment, man, I'm getting kind of stressed. I need to slow down because I don't want that type of heart. There's something going on in here. The devil's winning in that fight. So I need to take account. I need to be honest with myself. I need to cool the heck out. Some of you say, yeah. Again, I forgave her, but she ain't coming to my house for Thanksgiving. If that's you, you got some work to do. Thanksgiving is right around the corner. Our mouths betray us. Our mouths betray us. Now, I know some probably think like, I'm sorry. I don't care what you're reading. I can't. I'm not Joseph. I'm not some sort of Bible superhero. But what I need you to understand is that Joseph is a person like you. He doesn't have a big J on his chest. He wasn't better than you. He doesn't have the superpower of forgiveness. He struggled just like the rest of us do. But he understood things, and he reminded himself daily. I know awful things. I know some awful things happen to many of you. But I promise you, being beaten up and sold into slavery, let's just agree it's up there. Let's just agree that it might be a tinge more than happened to you. And yet, this ordinary man, he canceled the debt. He chose to cancel the debt. He was right in every one of those things, including the dream that ticked them off. It didn't matter that he was right. He wanted to be reconciled because that's what God calls us to do. And if you're somehow thinking that doesn't count for you, then where does that say about your place with God? Friends, in this study through Genesis, we've been going through for like 7 weeks. We have tried to push back from the lessons that we thought we learned in the past, and we've tried to take in and understand this whole thing. Try to get a 5,000-foot view and see the correlation and how these transpond, to know that they're not just isolated incidents. Do you remember when we were talking about Joseph's father, Jacob, Israel? We talked about Jacob. We talked about his brother Esau. We remember Jacob's name meant deceiver, deceitful one, grabbing at the heel grabber. He wanted everything his big brother had. And he lied and he stole and he cheated. Esau, the big, tough, good with a bow, great hunter, alpha male. Remember, Jacob was terrified because he knew he wronged his brother. He stole from his brother twice. And so he runs away. He stole Esau's birthright and his blessing, and Esau made a vow to kill his younger brother if he saw him again. To kill him. If we go back to Genesis chapter 33, Now Jacob looked up and saw Esau coming to him. Remember, God told him he needed to go back home, and he was terrified, but Jacob at this point follows God. God says, go home. He's heading home. And then he sees his brother off in the distance. It says, Jacob looked up and saw Esau coming toward him with what? With 400 men. Now, if this is a movie, again, this is where the music changes, and Jacob is seeing not just Esau, not just his big brother, not just this big, burly alpha male going to kill him. He sees all of these soldiers, and so what does Jacob do? He divided the children amongst Leah and Rachel and the 2 slave women. He put the slaves and their children first, and then Leah with her children next, and then Rachel, and what's that name? Joseph. Puts them there last. And so this is little Joseph. I don't know how old he is. Let's say around 8. So this is 8-year-old Joseph. What is 8-year-old Joseph thinking? I mean, he hears someone say, oh no, there's Uncle Esau. And little Joseph would have been thinking, wait a minute, I've heard stories about Uncle Esau. Didn't Dad steal from Uncle Esau? And Uncle Esau said if he ever saw Dad again that he would kill him. And someone would say, yep, that's the guy. And you have to think that in that moment, little, impressionable Joseph, that in this moment, he's thinking, what are all those men doing? 400 soldiers. And little Joseph sees that, and he sees Uncle Esau. And Joseph is the only kid, by the way, listed by name. He's the only kid listed by name. This says in verse 3, he himself, Jacob, went on ahead, and what did he do? He bowed to the ground 7 times until he approached his brother. And there's Esau standing over Jacob. He's standing over the deceitful one. He's standing over the liar. He's standing over the trickster. He's standing over the one who stole everything from him so early. He's standing over this guy who stole his blessing and birthright. He's standing over family who stabbed him in the back. And I imagine little Joseph thinking, we're about to die. And the bad part is everybody knew Jacob and knew what Jacob did and knew that Jacob did not deserve forgiveness. He was wrong. In verse 4, but Esau ran to meet him. He hugged him. He threw his arms around him, wrapped his arms around his neck, and he kissed him. What does that remind you of, folks? And then they wept. And when Esau looked up and saw the women, the children, he asks his brother, his little brother, who are these with you? Jacob answers, he says, the children God has graciously given your servant. Then the slaves and their children approached him and bowed down. Leah and her children, they approached and they're all bowing down. Everyone is bowing. And then Joseph and Rachel approach, and here's little Joseph, little 8-year-old Joseph, bowing down to someone who's large and in charge. And in that moment in history, Joseph, he experienced forgiveness. And so Esau said, what do you mean by this whole procession I met? And Jacob says, to find favor with you, like, hey, you want them, they're yours. And here's what Esau says. He says, I have enough, my brother. He says, keep what you have. Do you realize that in that moment, what Esau is saying is, you don't owe me anything anymore. I'm not mad. I've just missed you. I've missed you so much. I've canceled that debt. And so, friends, think about this. What if when Joseph was there standing with all of his brothers, and Esau could rightly kill every one of them? He had the right, the power, he had the ability. What if in that moment he thought, I've seen this scene before. Joseph went through all of those things, and yet he's there, and his brothers are bowing before him. What if he thought this seemed so familiar? I remember kneeling down before Uncle Esau, and for whatever reason, Esau chose to forgive. Nobody thought that was going to happen. Nobody thought that was going to be the end result. What if, because Joseph had been forgiven, he could now look at his brothers today and say, I forgive you, I have canceled this debt. All because he knew that someone canceled his debt a long, long time ago. And so here's the point. Those of us who have been extended forgiveness should freely extend forgiveness, or shame on us. And so here's the $1 million question. Who do you need to forgive? Brothers and sisters, who do you need to forgive? Is it your mom or dad? I mean, you're supposed to grow up in a household where you're being told that you are fearfully and wondrously made. And maybe you didn't. And by the way, let that be a lesson to some of you parents today. Your kids are supposed to grow up in a household where they continuously hear that they are fearfully and wondrously made. But maybe that wasn't your story, and now years, maybe decades later, you've walked around broken. Maybe one of your parents was like relationally distant, maybe emotionally manipulative, passive aggressive, or maybe seemed to completely check out and unable to even connect with emotion. Maybe it's your kids. You tried. You really tried. You did whatever you thought it would take to raise them, and now they're adults, and for whatever reason, they just want little to nothing to do with you. And you're thinking, what the heck happened? When you were born, I swore to God that I would give my life for you. And now I'm last on your priority list? Maybe it's a brother or sister, a close friend. Maybe they just messed everything up. Maybe they made a really bad judgment call. Maybe they hurt you. Maybe. Maybe they thought they were helping. But it's not the help that you wanted. And maybe that relationship is in jeopardy. And this has been dragging on and dragging on and dragging on and dragging on. Do you need to forgive them? Not because of a sermon, not because of a nosy pastor, but because that's what God has called you to do. Maybe it's a spouse or an ex-spouse. No matter which one of those things or situation, here's what's crazy. Some of you are holding on to stuff and don't realize who's watching or listening or learning. You're totally oblivious to the little Josephs that are watching and learning. You are ignorant to the fact that your kids, your grandchildren, the people around you, heck, co-workers, are affected by the way you forgive or withhold forgiveness. Friends, the Bible says forgiven people forgive people, period. There is no exclusion. There is no exception. There is no workaround. Or how about this? If you're not giving it, then maybe you ain't got it. And it may be bad English, but it's good theology. And so if you ain't got it, friends, there's one way to get it. Watch this. I said we'd talk about this. Matthew 18. Setting the stage, Matthew 18, Peter comes to Jesus and he basically says, how many times do I need to forgive people? He's pretty self-righteous. And he says like 7 times. Pat on the back. And then classic Jesus. Okay, let me tell you a story. And Peter's like, I don't want a story. I just need a number, okay? Let's speed this up. But Jesus shares this parable of the unmerciful servant. So there's this guy, he owes his master an equivalent of today's money, literally like $3 trillion. And the master forgives him of all of it. It's wild. Check it out. But then that unmerciful guy goes and he bumps into this guy that owes him like 12 G's. Pennies compared to what he owed this other guy. And that guy asked for the same mercy that this first guy was given from the master. But this unmerciful servant looks him in the eye and says, no way. He literally puts his hands around his neck and chokes him. He chokes him and he wants him to be put in prison until he can be paid back. And ain't nobody paying anybody back in prison. And everyone watching is blown away. They're astonished by the irony and hypocrisy. And so here's how Jesus wraps this thing up. And I need every one of you to listen to this. He says, shouldn't you also have had mercy on your fellow servant as I had mercy on you? And because he was angry, his master, this guy who had forgiven the $12 trillion, he had the jailers torture him and imprison him until he could pay back everything he owed. And Jesus gives the action step, the moral to the story. He says, so also my heavenly Father will do to you unless every one of you, no exceptions, every one of you forgives his brother or sister from your heart. Friends, it doesn't get any more clear. It doesn't get any more black and white. So Jesus is saying that if you've been offered forgiveness by him, let alone by other people, if you've been offered forgiveness by the life, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus, then you are to offer forgiveness because you've been forgiven. Period. Just like little Joseph. And now he's big Joseph, and he's standing over his brothers, and he's thinking, thank God for Uncle Esau. Thank God for Uncle Esau. And not just for what he did, but for what he taught me. Thank God for the forgiveness I witnessed so I could now give you the forgiveness that you deserve and need. And I'm not saying any of this is easy, but I am saying if you are a Christian, forgiven people forgive people. Period. And I hope by the power of the Holy Spirit that this week that you'll begin to be able to begin to do that.